The bar was nearly empty that Tuesday night when Ryan slipped onto a stool, loosening the knot of his tie. To the world, he was just another tired dad at the end of a long day. His suit didn't quite fit anymore, and his eyes carried the weary kindness of a man who'd spent years putting someone else first. He ordered a soda, he never drank alcohol anymore, and pulled out his phone to check the babysitter's texts about his daughter. At the other end of the bar sat a woman in a sleek black dress, a faint diamond bracelet catching the light. She looked like someone out of a magazine, poised, expensive, untouchable. But there was something hollow in her stare, a silence in the way she swirled her glass of wine without drinking it. Ryan wasn't one to bother strangers. But when she let out a soft, almost defeated laugh under her breath, he heard it, and heard himself say, "Rough day?" She turned, startled, then smirked a little. "You could say that." He smiled faintly, the way a single dad smiles when he's had too many rough days himself. "Well," he said, "you made it through. That's something." She actually laughed at that, shaking her head. Her name was Claire. CEO of a big tech company, she said, though she didn't say it proudly. That night, she confessed more than she'd probably told anyone in years, how lonely success had turned out to be. How every relationship seemed to come with strings, or expectations, or disappointment. And she asked about him. He didn't brag, didn't have much to brag about anyway, just told her about Ellie, his 7-year-old daughter, who still left little sticky notes in his briefcase, "I love you, Daddy." How he'd promised himself he'd never let her feel like she came second to anyone or anything. He didn't notice, but her eyes softened as he talked about Ellie. When they parted that night, he smiled politely, paid for his soda, and left. He assumed he'd never see her again. People like her didn't come back for people like him. But the next night, she was there. Same stool. Same black dress. Same empty glass of wine. "Hi," she said shyly when he walked in, as though he were the one who might not want her there. This time, she asked if she could join him. And that night, something shifted. Over the next few weeks, they became regulars, meeting at the same spot, exchanging stories and laughter. One night, she showed up carrying a wrapped package. "I hope you don't mind," she said, pushing it across the bar. He opened it to find a brand new backpack and art supplies, the ones he'd once told her he couldn't afford for Ellie's school project. His throat tightened. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she said simply. That was the thing about Ryan, he never expected anyone to give. And that was the thing about Claire, she'd been surrounded by people who only ever took. One rainy evening, weeks later, Ryan arrived late, flustered. Ellie had spiked a fever, and the sitter had bailed. "You shouldn't even be here tonight," Claire scolded gently. "I couldn't let you sit here alone," he admitted. For the first time, Claire asked if she could meet Ellie. That weekend, she came by the modest little apartment, nervous as a teenager. And when she knelt down to Ellie's level and introduced herself, Ryan saw something he'd never seen in her eyes before, not loneliness, not weariness. Hope. Ellie immediately tugged her by the hand into her room to show her drawings. Ryan stood there, stunned, listening to his daughter's laughter ring through the tiny apartment, and something inside him broke wide open. Weeks turned to months. That bar became their place. And one night, as they walked home under the streetlights, Claire stopped suddenly. "You know," she said, voice trembling, "you're the first person in years who's ever asked me how I'm doing, and actually cared to hear the answer." He reached for her hand and gave her the same warm, quiet smile he'd given her that first night. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Because sometimes, the person who feels like they have nothing left to give, ends up being the one who gives you everything you didn't know you were missing. Two lonely hearts had stumbled into each other, a single dad who thought he'd never matter to anyone but his daughter, and a CEO who thought she'd never be more than her title. But kindness has a way of finding its way home. And that little bar stool on a quiet Tuesday night became the start of something neither of them ever expected, something better than success, better than survival. Family. No matter how different our worlds seem, we're all just people looking for kindness, connection, and someone to believe in us. Sometimes the smallest conversation can change everything. Never underestimate the power of showing up, for a stranger, for your child, for yourself.